show where we talk about the NFL and fantasy football. As always, we'll be going over the winners from the past week in the TNL Dynasty League. Then, we'll be sharing some words from our biggest loser about their loss. From there, we'll move into week 6 of the NFL. From Thursday night's snooze fest to a defensive showcase at SoFi Stadium that came down to a kick. From there, we'll be moving into the injuries that will be impacting your week 7. And then we'll look ahead at the matchups where some of the league's best quarterbacks will finally get to rest those arms. Congrats to our winners, starting with one more time, who went out and got one more win. Josh Allen put up another great performance despite his fumble. 329 yards thrown, 3 touchdowns, and 32 yards rushing led to 26 points on the board. Then, the Cleveland Flex offenders have to love Tyreek Hill's ability to catch the ball no matter who is throwing it in Miami. 177 yards on 12 catches put 23 points on the board toward the Flex offenders' winning total. A low-scoring game on both sides. Rel Reed option outperformed their opponent heavily due to Jamar Chase's performance at the Superdome. 132 yards on just 7 receptions and 2 visits to the end zone gave him the most points between the two teams, 28.5. Unsolicited Dak picks kept his opponent's losing streak going. His first-round pick CMC didn't just run but was active in the passing game as well. 69 yards on 13 carries and 89 yards on 7 receptions gave him 17.5 points and helped Dak picks to their win. In the battle of divisional number 1s, Gunsuit managed to edge out Team Mercado. Another huge performance by Joe Burrow, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns with 25 yards rushing, and a touchdown for himself gave Soup 32 points. While on the other side, only 3 targets and a big old goose egg for Valdez-Scantling must have frustrated Team Mercado in this match. Come Soup won by 1.5 points. And finally, the Good Odells are still rolling, securing a 5th straight win against a beaten down Backwoods Hamburglers. Derrick Henry may have been resting, but Ramondre Stevenson was able to shoulder the responsibilities of running back in his lineup, rushing 76 yards on 19 carries and 2 touchdowns, while also catching 4 passes for 15 yards. All of these stats making up the 22 points he put up. Congrats again to all our winners. Seems that even with all the injuries and the first group of bye weeks, teams still have players putting up some big points to add to their victories. One such team that is not doing that and instead doing the opposite, taking hard hits due to injury and lack of player production, is our... This week, our biggest loser is harnessing their inner Drake and going back to back. Backwoods Hamburglers. Now, before we dive into where his team is underperforming, even though it's safe to say that it's in all positions on his roster, the Backwoods Hamburglers manager has mentioned that he's had a lot going on. So his lineup hasn't been much of a priority for him. That being said, some quick roster changes Sunday morning could have lent themselves to the Backwoods win. 43 points sat on his bench, so while he sees himself at the bottom, let's see if he manages to roster better for week 7. His statement this week coming in the form of a trade that sees him trading away Jonathan Taylor and Jalen Waddle for Zach Wilson, Joe Mixon, and A.J. Dillon. Still plenty of time for him to play, even if it's not for the championship trophy. He can avoid displaying our last place trophy in his home all next year. Moving into our NFL recap, football fans might feel the need to petition Thursday Night Football as we were treated to another snooze fest of a game. Now, the argument can be made that this was a defensive showcase, but managers who are rostering players such as Fields, David Montgomery, Darnell Mooney, Scary Terry, or Curtis Samuel want to see balls being thrown, catches being made, and celebration dances in the end zone. Sunday football gave us more of what we enjoyed though. The Giants moved to 5-1 with a win over the Ravens. I mean, what? This is Danny Dimes, a quarterback, a team rather, that people were overlooking prior to season start. While Daniel Jones isn't doing anything spectacular, he's putting up reasonable yardage, throwing 19 for 27 for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. While Saquon is enjoying his health and his football, rushing for 83 yards on 22 carries and getting into the end zone to boot. The Giants are giving New York plenty of reasons to enjoy sports right now. To build on top of that, the Jets also got a win against the Packers. Zach Wilson threw 10 for 18 for 110 yards. Nothing impressive, but for a young QB coming back to health, at the very least, he's not throwing interceptions and holding onto the ball when he gets sacked. As for another young player, rookie Breece Hall gave us another impressive performance. 116 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown. He's definitely one for the future when it comes to this Jets offense. Another name being thrown around a lot is Bailey Zappi. Filling in for the quarterback position while Mac Jones nurses an ankle injury, he's now led the Patriots to another convincing win. 24 for 34 for 309 yards and 2 touchdowns. Should Mac Jones even come back? Now, it's reported that Belichick believes that you win your position in the preseason and in practice, but if a quarterback is putting you in the win column, why change things? Another player to highlight from this game is Ramondre Stevenson, who is enjoying all the extra touches while Damian Harris remains out with a hamstring injury, making great use of his carries, rushing for 2 touchdowns. In my hot take game of the week, we saw the Steelers get by Tom Brady and the Bucks. Pickett was able to find his receivers well, but a hit in the third time, exiting the game and leaving it up to Trubisky. He was able to get it done, throwing for an additional touchdown in the fourth, helping secure their close win. The Steelers remain under 500, but it was the highlights from the sidelines of Tom Brady going after his teammates that seemed to grasp the headlines. Then we had a slugfest of a game as the Bills met the Chiefs. Both quarterbacks threw for over 300 yards, but it was 2 interceptions thrown by Mahomes that did them in. Allen spread the ball nicely with 3 separate receivers for touchdowns. Stephon Diggs taking top spot with 148 yards in 10 receptions. Kelsey, on the other hand, was a shadow of oneself as he couldn't find the end zone. With both QBs still putting up huge numbers, one can only hope that we see these 2 teams in the playoffs for another high-octane game. Sunday night, the Eagles continued their unbeaten run as they beat the Cowboys 26-17. Cooper Rush might have played his last downs as quarterback with the return of Dak on the horizon. His performance against the Eagles show why he's a backup, throwing 3 interceptions and only 18 for 38. As for the Eagles quarterback, Jalen Hurts kept his position ranking high, throwing 15 for 25 for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. There are no signs of this Eagles team slowing, and fans will hope that their bye week doesn't slow their momentum into their Week 8 matchup against the Steelers. And finally, Monday night had the Chargers edging out the Broncos in overtime. Not much can be said for the Broncos. There was a lot of hope for Russell Wilson as he made his move to Denver, and perhaps the injury to his shoulder could be to blame for the very slow start, but if they don't start getting wins, I think he'd consider this experiment failed. As for Justin Herbert, he was slinging the ball down the field, but he was coming up short, throwing 37 for 57, and he couldn't find the end zone. The singular touchdown for the Chargers coming from Austin Eckler. Now, hopefully Herbert can dial it in, as he can expect the Seahawks to challenge the Chargers secondary, forcing him to throw just as much, if not more, than he did in this game. Week 6 was lighter on injuries than we had come to expect so far this season, but let's take a look at the players who are missing time on the field and in your lineup. Starting things off with Carson Wentz of the Commanders, who suffered from a broken finger. He had to get some surgery, but the success of it could lend itself to him missing less time than originally thought, reports stating only 4 weeks will be missed. Next up, J.K. Dobbins sat out the second half of his game as he seemed to be nursing his knee, an injury that he sustained last season. He'll have to be monitored through the week, and it's unclear yet if he'll be suiting up against the Browns. And Hollywood Brown suffered a late injury Sunday that could have him missing multiple weeks. Initial x-rays came back negative of any substantial injury to his foot, but the team is seeking a second opinion to gauge the time off the field properly. The Patriots lost a wide receiver in Kendrick Bourne, who could be suffering from turf toe, an injury that would have him out for at least 28 days. Aaron Rodgers may have to rely on his Aaron counterpart, as Randall Cobb suffered an ankle injury during their third quarter in their game against the Jets. The concern is a high ankle sprain that would see the receiver sidelined 4 to 6 weeks. 2 injuries for the Colts. First, we have Kiki Cutie getting added to the concussion list, and he's began his journey back to health, but may not be cleared in time for their next game. Then Deion Jackson suffered a quad injury that saw him exiting the game. The Colts are suffering heavily in the running back position, so to see another one go down, one would assume that they rely heavily on the receivers almost exclusively in Week 7, or they do everything they can to ensure JT and Naheem Hines get back to health. Now, the Dolphins can't catch a break in the quarterback position, as Skylar Thompson suffered a thumb injury, but it's unclear if he fractured it or not. Saints tight end Adam Troutman picked up a foot injury that forced him out of the game, but doesn't appear to be anything of great concern, and it's possible that he suits up Week 7. Another tight end, Cameron Brate of the Bucs, sustained a scary head and neck injury that had him leave the field on a stretcher. He does have movement in all his extremities, which is always a great sign, and will most likely be placed on the concussion protocol and will miss some time. In this same game, Kenny Pickett also saw him getting hit hard, sending him to the growing list of concussion protocol players, so expect him to miss Week 7. Now that we made it through the injuries, let's look ahead at some Week 7 games and matchups in our league. To start things off, let's go over teams that will have their bye. We'll be missing two huge quarterbacks as the Bills and Eagles will get some rest. The quarterbacks in question, 1 and 2 in rankings, Allen and Hurts, have been an integral part to teams everywhere, so hope managers have a great streaming option on their bench. Cooper Kupp will also be missing week 7 as the Rams have a bye along with Jay Jetta and the Vikings. Thursday night kicks off our week with the return of D-Hop as the Cardinals face the Saints. Will D-Hop make an instant impact to the Cardinals offense that has clearly missed his ability on the field? Couple that with the new acquisition Robbie Anderson, could Kyler have a breakout game? As for the Saints, Olave looks to return being cleared from his concussion protocol, which is great news for Andy Dalton, who will need the rookie on his A game. Sunday, we'll see if Nick Chubb can bounce back from a quiet week 6 and run past the Ravens defense to add to his 7 rushing touchdowns so far this season. Fantasy managers will also want to see Amari Cooper have another high target game and haul in another touchdown. As for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson will want to overcome his recent struggles against a Browns defense that just got walked over by a third-string quarterback. We'll be expecting Mark Andrews and Duvernay to benefit from a solid Jackson performance, but if he continues with the struggles, hopefully Dobbins is healthy enough to play and get those yards and points. Dak Prescott will return as the Cowboys host the Lions. Fans and managers will be yelling at the Cowboys' offensive line to ensure his safety and time to throw the ball to receivers CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. Coming off a bye, DeAndre Swift will make his return in this matchup, taking snaps away from Jamal Williams, while Amon-Ra St. Brown will face a challenge as he aims to produce after a quiet week 5. Two struggling teams will get their chance to add a second win to their record as the Texans face the Raiders. Both teams should have gotten plenty of rest and practice coming off their bye. Will Dameon Pierce run rampant while Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins challenge each other to be Mills' go-to receiver? As for the Raiders, many believe by the way they're performing they shouldn't be 1-4. Devontae Adams will want to make the most of his time on the field as he awaits some type of discipline from his week 5 incident in the tunnel after their loss. So Carr is going to go all in with his number 1 receiver and handing the ball to Josh Jacobs to get it done on the ground. As for Sunday night, we will see the return of Tua as the Dolphins host the Steelers. The potential of Tyreek Hill and Waddle putting up huge points is present, with Tua throwing the ball so long as his offensive line can protect him and he plays smart to avoid another big injury. For the Steelers, it's still unknown if Kenny Pickett will clear concussion protocol in time. With that, there is a chance Trubisky suits up. Either quarterback will look to give Claypool another touchdown or 2, while Harris is evolving into a more receiving back and will want to add to his 3 touchdowns on the season. Then we wrap things on Monday with the Patriots facing the Bears. No word yet if Mac Jones will be returning to the field, so there is small potential that Bailey Zappi continues his stint at quarterback. Ramondre Stevenson will look to add to his performance from week 6, especially while Harris remains out. The big points for the Patriots more than likely stemming from their stellar defense, who have put up more than 30 points over their last 2 games. With the Bears, they may be out of their starting quarterback who seems to have re-aggravated a previous shoulder injury. Overall, it's better to look elsewhere for points and not bank on their offense to give you a final day win. Big name returns, D-Hop, Dak, Tua will make all the difference for these offenses moving forward. And with the return of Tua, could change the landscape of the NFL as we see how well he's recovered from his concussion. Will the Dolphins game see calls being made at the slightest touch? Will other games take players out if they take just too long to get up after a hit? We'll just have to wait and see. But that'll be it for the weekly recap video. Be sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying the NFL and fantasy football content. Leave a comment with a hot take that you have heading into week 7. Mine this week, Carr and the Raiders have a huge game, but still come up short and lose to the Texans, who will be led by Dameon Pierce. For the Third and Long Dynasty League, this is Commissioner signing off.